You're part of the photographic community that gives me so much, so it's time to give back to all of you. It's my mission to inspire and pass on my knowledge, passion and skills. You can subscribe using the watermark button on the screen. Ring your bell to make your subscription count. Please stay to the end and comment. It's your feedback that keeps the channel going.
Right, good morning. Sorry, I'm absolutely starving. Instant oats, cinnamon. It's supposed to be steaming, but I couldn't be bothered to wait, so I've not boiled any fresh water, so it's a little bit tepid, shall we say. But I wanted to get up here as quick as I can because the weather's supposed to change later on, and at the moment it's overcast, which is great. But overcast and pouring down with rain is something that I don't want to be doing this video in. Because I'm going to spend a lot of time explaining to you about focus stacking. I'm going to show you how I do it in the field, and then when we leave here, we're going to clear off, get back home into the office, and I'm going to show you what I do in the office. What's critical with this video is I'm going to be doing everything in RAW. So the initial focus stack is going to be done in RAW, and the initial edit is going to be done in RAW. And a lot of people who do focus stacking end up converting their images into TIFFs or JPEGs or Photoshop files right after the stacking stage, or to do the stacking itself. But there is a way that you can do this in RAW, and then you can output a RAW file for editing in Photoshop afterwards. So this is really quite critical because it improves the quality of your images. So I'm going to finish my breakfast, then I'm going to set the camera up, then I'm going to show you what we're doing, then we're going to edit them. So stick with me, and we'll see if we can learn something together.
I took my time in setting up the camera and making sure I had the composition correct. When I was happy, I finally mounted it on the tripod, plugged in the cable release, so I was ready to make the first exposure. But before any of this, I had to take care to make sure that the exposure settings were just right. And because I wanted to use a fairly slow shutter speed, I had to use some neutral density filters. If you want to find out more about using neutral density filters, you may be interested in this video on slow shutter speed photography.
Okay, right then, so focus stacking. What's focus stacking all about? Well, as you can see, I'm trying to take a picture of the waterfall behind me, and I want some foreground interest as well. Now, I've had to pick a particular shutter speed to make sure that I get a particular effect that I want. And the effect that I want is I want these bubbles coming down here in the picture. So I want to have these slight white streaks. It's actually not worked out quite as well as I'd hoped. I was hoping I was going to get them a little bit more stronger in the image, but it's worked out that when I tried it just now, I have to use a shutter speed of 1.6 seconds. Faster than that they disappear, slower than that they're too short and they don't really stand out. So that's kind of restricted my shutter speed. Now, to get that shutter speed, I have to, I've put on a neutral density filter, and I've selected a aperture of around f8 or f11 because that's where the lens is optically at its best. I could have gone for f16, f22 or something like that and get a similar effect. The problem is at those points the lens starts to lose sharpness. So one of the ways around the problem that I've got now, which is depth of field, is to use focus stacking. So what's depth of field? Well, depth of field is the amount of the subject, or amount of the frame, should I say, which is in focus. So you could have the background here, which is our waterfall, and our foreground here, which are these rocks, and the distance between them is basically the depth of field. So if we had these in focus and the background in focus, no problem at all. We've got exactly what we want. Or if for creative reasons we wanted one of these subjects blurred, wouldn't be a problem either. But I want the foreground rocks, so I want the rocks here, which I don't know if you can see them or not, but they're just sort of over this side, to be in focus as well. And the only way to get those in focus and the waterfall in focus is to use something called focus stacking. So focus stacking works basically along the lines of you focus on a foreground, a midground and a background, and that's normally enough for landscape photography. So that gives us enough subject information to enable us to then stack those together inside of Photoshop, and in this case I'm going to use something called Helicon Focus to take the picture. So what's critical about what I'm going to be doing in the editing is I'm going to do all of this in RAW. So that means that when I've actually got the stack together, I can go back into Lightroom and edit it as a raw image. And that's particularly important to me for the quality of my pictures. So I'm going to get you guys down here so you can see the back of the camera. And that's going to enable me to actually show you exactly what we're doing when we're doing the focusing. Okay, so bear with me 2 seconds, I'll get you down here. Okay, so where we are right now, it's not so important that you see me in the frame. What's important is that you see what I'm doing in the frame. So these rocks sort of like just down here, those are the ones which we're going to have as our foreground interest. And then we're going to zoom out eventually, and we're going to include the background, which is going to be the waterfall down there in the focus as well. So I'm going to swing the camera around so that you're looking at the back of the camera which I'm using. Okay, so here's our picture that we're taking at the moment. So I'm just going to adjust the composition slightly because I want to bring this over a little bit more. I want to bring the camera up a little bit. Just starting to rain now as well. And there's our frame. Okay, so we've already set up the information on here, but we'll get some more info back on here again anyway. So there's our histogram. We're shooting at 1.6 seconds. We're shooting it. We're just pushing it up to about 1/10 of a second. So if you can see this focusing thing down here, look, I'm going to bring this as far down in the frame as we can. So that's there. So I'm going to take a focus point here, then one further into the picture, then one on the background. So hand in front of the lens. That marks the point that we're going to start. I'm going to focus on the first point, which is down here. I use back button focusing, which is that button there, and that just focuses on that point for me. Shoot again. Next part in the frame, I'm going to go down to, I'm actually going to take an extra one, to be honest. I'm going to focus there as well. No, I'm not. I'm going to focus there. Second one. And finally, we're going to focus on the waterfall. And then we just put our hand at the end to make sure that we've got what we want. I just want to look at these in playback a minute, because what's really important, yes, there we are, we've got those white streaks in there. That was really important that we captured those. Okay, so that's all there is to focus stacking the field. So let's go back and get back in the office and edit these pictures.
Okay, so shall we edit this file at last? Right, okay, so the main point of this video was really to get to this point, because it's all about working in RAW, focus stacking in RAW, and exporting a finished image from that. So you've already seen in the field how I put the image together and how I sort of work out what I'm going to shoot, where I'm going to focus. One of the things I did in that, if you remember, is I put my hand up to the lens.
And the important reason for that is because when we're in Lightroom, which we'll switch into now so you can have a look at what I mean, is where I have my hand. If you look at the bottom row of the screen, you'll see a hand there, 3 pictures and another hand. That's how I use it, and that's why I do that to mark it. So I know that these 3 images in the middle are the ones that we're going to be working on and that we've used for this stacked image. The next bit I'm going to do is really quite key, and you need to sort of remember this, because I'm going to select all 3 images, highlight them, just a command and a click on the mouse button on the Mac anyway. It'll probably be different on the Windows based machine. And now we're going to open these up in a program called Helicon Focus, and we're going to do it by using the export dialog. So if we go up to File and down to Export, it'll then bring up this dialog box. And depending on what software you've got on your computer and what plugins you've got inside of Photoshop, it'll look very slightly different, sorry. And you'll see here I've got one called Helicon Focus. So all I've got to do is select the Helicon Focus, and it gives me a number of settings of how I can set this up. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to leave the name exactly as it is, because I'm not interested in changing that. And the part that's really critical is this bit now in the file settings. You have to make sure that you're exporting it as a DNG file. If you don't export it as a DNG or RAW file, it's going to come out of Lightroom as a TIFF or a JPEG, and then you won't be able to work on it in RAW when you export it from Helicon Focus back into Lightroom. Okay, so we change it over to a DNG, and that's all that we need to do. So let's export that now, and it's going to put those files into Helicon Focus for us automatically. And you can see that it's working, because in the top of the screen we've got the progress bar. So we'll just wait and let it do that. Okay, so it's switched over, and we're now opened up in Helicon Focus. It's the normal dialog boxes, the normal screen interface that we would get for Helicon Focus. On the right hand side we've got our source images. Along the top we've got rendering, retouching, which I've covered in some other videos already, text, scale, and saving. We're going to come back to saving in a minute, because that's very important as well. But what we have got down the bottom here in something called raw development settings is a little piece of information up here which we're going to change, and that's where some more magic happens, because inside this conversion coding up at the top, it allows us to do it as built-in raw loader, OS X raw converter, or raw in DNG out. Now DNG is a digital negative, and basically it's a standard format which Adobe have introduced, and it allows us to work in raw files with inside of Lightroom and Photoshop. So basically what we're doing now is we've introduced a raw file into Helicon Focus. We're going to work on it, and we're going to output it as a DNG file. And when we output that DNG file, it will work exactly as a RAW inside of Lightroom. In fact, it is a RAW. So we're going to click OK on that. The actual source images that we've got here and the rendering method that we use, it's going to be fine to use rendering method A. I'm not going to go through what the different weighted average, depth map and pyramid settings mean, because it's not the point of this video, and it would go on for absolutely ever. But basically what I do with these 3 is experiment. I'll try one, I might try the others just to see if I get a better result. But I know for this one, method A, weighted average, is going to be fine, and to be honest, normally it is. So let's just render that image now. Normal box comes up at the bottom, starting to render it, and we'll just wait for that to do its magic. Okay, so there we are. At last it's finished. Now we could, if we wanted to, like I said, I've done it in other videos, we could go into retouching and see if any of these leaves or anything's moved, any of the branches have got any ghosting on them, and copy bits from different files across and try and use that to get a better image. But to be honest,
I know with this picture that we're okay. We don't have to worry about any of that. I never really bother with anything to do with text or scale, but what I am going to do is go into saving, because this is the final bit of the jigsaw to get our raw file out. So on the save options on the right hand side, we don't have to worry about any of the others. All we're going to do is simply save the image. But it will open up another dialog box, and that dialog box allows us to decide, using the file structure menu on the left hand side, where we want to save it. In this case, I'm going to put it back in the folder, with the original raw files. And at the bottom here, we can export it as a TIFF still if we wanted to, if we changed our minds, as a JPEG or a DNG file. If you haven't followed the other steps, you won't get that DNG option come up, because it will already have destroyed the raw data. But we're going to put it across as a DNG. So we click on save, and then that file is being exported back into our original folder, and we'll be able to look at that in Lightroom in a minute. Okay, so to complete the process, it's going to ask us to exit Helicon Focus. There we go. And it's still actually doing this job for us. There we go, exporting 3 photographs to Helicon Focus. So it's doing that job. It's exported the image for us. It's very kindly shaded it in blue so it matches all the others down here in the left hand corner. But there's an image which I've already edited, and I'm going to use that one just to show you what I did. So let's open up that image in Develop. And here we are. You know, this is the edited version of it, but basically we've been able to use all of our raw controls on the right hand side, applying color adjustments, tonal adjustments, hue, saturation, sharpening, lens correction, just as we would on all the others down the bottom here. Absolutely no problem at all. So it's allowed us to do that and operate it in a raw file. All we need to do then, if we wanted to, would be to go back into Library and open the image up in Photoshop. So let me just show you the Photoshop image quickly. So with the image opened back up in Photoshop, on our right hand side we've got our normal panel, and I've opened a couple of adjustment layers for adjusting hue, saturation, levels, and I've also converted to a smart object and used Nik Effects Viveza on it as a smart filter, and produced the final image. So that's exactly what I'm going to do now, is show you the final picture. I hope you found the video interesting, and I'm sure there's something in there for everybody, whether you're interested in shooting in the field or whether you're interested in the editing. So if you've got any questions or any comments, then obviously now is the time to type them up. But let's have a look at that finished image. I hope you're enjoying the video. Maybe you would like to carry on, so try these suggestions next. I want to share more knowledge, more skills, more passion and stories about photography with you. So think about subscribing. If you do, ring the bell. It will make your subscription count. If you have time, comment. I will see you on the next video, so get out there and enjoy your photography.